to welcome everyone to It's a Grand Life. Our guest today is Elaine K. Williams, a psychotherapist, an author, and really a specialist in this whole niche of grandparents raising grandchildren. She is the author of the book, The Sacred Work of Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. And Elaine, we just want to welcome you to It's a Grand Life. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I enjoy. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I'm not a parenting grandmother, but I am a grandmother. So, and my sister is a parenting grandmother, so I have a close-up view.
Absolutely, and I know many friends who've been in groups with you that, in fact, at a church I used to go to over in Northville, and they just said wonderful things about your expertise and all that you shared with them, and really couldn't wait to get you on the program. We've been doing some juggling, but here we are.
So here we are.
So why did you write the book, The Sacred Work of Grandparents Raising Grandchildren?
You know, that's a really fun question for me, because I had no idea there was such an epidemic of grandparents raising their grandchildren until I met a group in Washington, D.C. I was just walking through the mall and saw Hillary Clinton, then senator, talking to about 1,000 people, mostly grandparents. And I sat down and I befriended the Indiana and the Ohio grandparents group, who invited me to dinner. Oh. So I went to dinner, and in one evening, I knew I was, I was a national speaker at the time. I was going back and forth across the country. I thought, I can fit this in from time to time. And it was something that just seemed so vitally important to me. And I had literally just been informed about it, but I saw it's more than serendipity. I think I was supposed to do this. It just, everything came together,
Absolutely. I mean, you're in Washington, you're from Michigan, right? And you're in Washington for another conference. You're running into Senator Clinton. That doesn't happen every day. And talking about running into all these grandparents, and it's become, would you say, is it like a subspecialty within your practice?
Yes, I would say that at this point in time. This happened around 2007 or 8, and from that evening, the dinner with the grandparents, I learned that there's nothing out there. I had no competition in writing my book, because I wanted to focus not just on resources, of which there were not many back then, but I wanted to help them understand that the children, their parenting, have come from adversity of some type. And the psychological and the emotional and the social aspects of raising children with attention to that. I wanted to give them information that was practical and helpful to them and not overwhelming. And the fact that there's 2 generations between the grandparent and the grandchild,
right?
It's a different world for each one.
And this segment of the population, though, is exploding, right? In fact, in our state of Michigan, I heard the other day, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there are 45,000 children in the state of Michigan that are being raised by relatives, not all grandparents. 45,000. That's unbelievable.
It is. And, back in 2008, it was about 1 in every 9 children were being raised by a grandparent or a relative. Now they suspect it's even higher, but the resources available to them have improved, but they're still not, what they need to be. So if I allow my grandchild to go into foster care will pay the foster parent. But if I keep my grandchild and raise them as kin, as biologically connected, back then they would never pay a grandparent for doing it. And I could see that they were going through their retirement savings. Some of them were going back to work. And the more I got into it, the more I felt that this was, a good portion of my work and service.
Absolutely. Someone has to be an advocate for those of us who are in a situation we hadn't planned on. And I've been, over the years, I've done a lot of volunteer work in the inner city of Detroit, and one of my dear friends runs an organization called Central Detroit Christian Community Development Corporation. And I asked her, Lisa Johannan, who's the executive director, I said, what is it like with grandparents raising grandchildren in the inner city of Detroit? She
Wow.
says it's 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4 kids are being raised by
Wow.
grandparents. So it is a problem everywhere. And in fact, one of the things you talk about in your book is this generational divide. How that, you're talking about the 2 generations that separate grandparents from most grandchildren. But how does that generational divide impact grandparents raising their grandkids?
I think the divide adds stress to both the grandparent and to the child, although the child is not likely to have any context for it. But I'll just use myself as an example because I'm their age or maybe slightly older at this point in time. But the world I grew up in, there was no computers, there was no technology. Things were slow. We just sort of plodded along. Discipline was strict. There wasn't, any need for an explanation because the parent ruled.
Right.
And this is not what this generation needs. Okay. The current generation is going to ask why, and in the old days, we'd say, because I said so, using my authority.
Right.
And now, oh, that won't fly. That won't get you beyond another minute.
Right.
So I think my first chapter, I think the title of it was, the book came out in 2011, so it's been a little bit. But is I say galoshes and you say boots.
Yes, right. That's so true. There's you almost need a translator, right, to
That's right.
communicate with the younger generation. And but one of the other things you said, which I thought made so much sense to me, that it's important for grandparents to impart their values and beliefs to the younger generation.
Yes.
We're missing something, aren't we?
Yes. It is, that is the one thing that the grandparents, I believe, have an advantage in that they've most of them have entered into their wisdom years. Okay. Their 60s or 70s. I even met a parenting grandparent who was 85,
Wow. Yeah.
years ago, and one as young as 39. So you have that range.
Right.
Okay. And so if kids don't learn their values and belief systems of what really matters in life, it's hard for them to develop a meaningful life. Okay. Because I gauge what I allow myself to be, involved in based on, does this have value for me? And if it doesn't, I may pass on it. But if I try so many things and I have no idea, I have no groundedness, no roots in being respectful, having integrity, knowing, how important it is to be honest, good communication skills. It's a pyramid. Values are a pyramid that we build life on. And unfortunately, in today's world, I mean, I don't have statistics or anything, but that's one of the last things parents impart to their kids because they're both running. They're just both going in different directions. I had a couple yesterday that I saw, and they have no basically room for the kids, and they really believe that they can't change their schedules. Okay. So the grandparents, one advantage they have, or a couple actually, is they have wisdom. Um, if they're willing to let go of how they were raised and learn some new things, keeping it simple, doesn't have to be complex.
Right.
They can be, I mean, look at Barack Obama. He was raised by his grandmother. Okay.
Right.
Look at Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
There were so many. I mean, I could just sit here and list them. So grandparents are at an advantage and a disadvantage. They kind of have to walk both paths.
But they can't miss out on communicating those values because that's absolutely essential, right?
Correct. Correct. That's the foundation. And if you think about the adversity that these children have been through, what is the one thing that will serve as a solid foundation for them is to know they're loved, is to know that they're going to be kept safe and secure, is to know that my grandparents care, or my uncle or aunt or whomever.
Right.
They really care about me. I matter in this life. And so I have to figure out how to get to point A and B in this life. And the values actually help the developmental stages that we all go through, that help us to successfully move through them.
That's absolutely terrific. And what about the importance of setting boundaries for our grandchildren? Is that's essential as well, isn't it? I mean, they
Yes.
want to be safe, and doesn't that
Yes.
help?
Boundaries, if I had to make a list of things that matter, boundaries would be number one. Because
Wow.
what has happened to the adult child in this family of grandparent and who's the parent of the adult child and the grandchild is almost 99.9% of the time, somebody's boundaries have been intruded upon. The adult child, if you look at the reasons why they're not raising their kids, they've intruded on boundaries either through the commission of crimes, um, being involved in addiction, dealing with all the problems that they're wrestling with, but they all circle around the fact that this person doesn't really have strong boundaries.
Right.
And that again comes into, we develop our boundaries as we go through those emotional stages. So the ability to say no in a way that you can be heard is really important without feeling guilt or shame or anxiety. It's just representing my beliefs and values.
Right.
Okay.
And it may take a while to learn that, but you have to have that ability to say no, don't you?
Yes, you do. I have found that the people who say yes for a long period in their life, say yes to everything, they burn out, they're at risk for burnout, and curiously, they get very angry as the years pass because they're realizing they're doing all the giving and there's not much in receiving. Okay. But they also aren't easily comfortable with receiving. So for a while, this works for them. But after a while, we need reciprocal relationships. And that's what values and boundaries teaches us. Okay.
Well, it's can the ability to say no be learned?
Yes, absolutely. We learned there was a reason why it was uncomfortable or unsafe to say no. So at some point, as we get older, we can say to ourselves, is this working for me? I notice I say yes, but inside I feel no, and I'd like to do something about this. And I say to people who are making that shift, in the next 10 interactions you have, if you only say no one time out of 10, do not focus on the 9 times you didn't. Focus on I did it one time. And that builds the foundation because that's self-respect. That's what I give to other people. I need to give it to myself.
And that is really applicable to the enabling parent of the substance abuser or the child that their direct child that has the behavioral health issues. We've enabled them to the point where now we've got to take over the parenting of their child, but they're not changing with the enabling. And
Right.
we have to draw a line and say, no, enough is enough. We're not going to continue to bail you out, to take care of this situation or that situation, repair the car or what have you, because it really doesn't help them get better. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely right. I interviewed before my book about 60 parenting grandparents, and since then, probably 100 at this point. Okay.
Okay.
And the thing I saw as a theme was the adult child not wanting to take responsibility for their child, but criticizing the parent in how they're raising their child. Okay. And also making promises to their child and then breaking them. Like, I'll take you to a hockey game next week and
Right.
never shows up. So who gets the wrath? The grandparent. Okay.
Right.
So if the grandparent lets this continue, both the child, the grandchild, and the adult parent are going to be enabling each other, and neither have boundaries. And that's where everything goes off the rails.
So you've talked to over 100 grandparents that are parenting their grandkids. And have you noticed a pattern of where there's some pent up anger with the children because of the relationship being broken off with their mom or their dad, and how that may be played out on the grandparent?
Yes.
And
I see that's a big theme, and it's hard for the grandparents. And that's why I always say to them, if we keep it simple, your grandchild has experienced a lot of challenges that other children the same age won't necessarily have in life. So we have to consider that when we are communicating with them, setting boundaries, and disciplining them. So, we need to be more invitational with them because, their greatest fear is rejection or abandonment. And most of the kids feel abandoned in some way because of their parent, not being available. So this is what the grandparent is up against, a child who may have these fears or who may be stuck with, I can't trust anybody, and the only reason they're, no matter what their age is, if I can't trust anybody, it's a pretty sure bet that in my first months of life, up until about 18 months, that my environment was very unstable. It was totally unpredictable.
wow.
I may have been hungry and maybe I got food, maybe they fed me and maybe they didn't. Okay. My diaper was a mess and I cried and nobody came. Okay. So that's how the kids build up this sense of, we call it insecure attachments. Okay. And that's what the grandparents are dealing with. They're dealing with children who are at risk for insecure attachments.
Okay. So if they didn't experience that abandonment in the first 18 months, they should have at least a leg up as far as stability, and even though the grandparent may be raising the grandchild, it should be a little easier at that point, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. No grandchild should, grandparent should be um, thinking that, this is not correctable. It is, and that's why I always say to them, keep it simple, make sure your child feels secure. And you do that by giving them a lot of predictability, a lot of routine, repetitive patterns so that they can feel safe in what is coming next or what can't come next, and share love with them. But it has to be heartfelt. And sometimes when the kids, these kids are very prone to being ADD or ADHD. Okay. And they see this now in preschool.
Wow.
Preschool. Yeah. So what the grandparents are doing, I called my book The Sacred Work. It is sacred. It is not for the faint of heart, because
Right.
they're going to basically, through repetition, help this child begin to trust again, help this child not to feel inferior, help this child to be autonomous and not dependent or scared of the world. But it all comes in how we set up the environment, not just the relationship.
Oh, that's good stuff right there. Our guest today on It's a Grand Life is Elaine K. Williams. She's the author of the book, The Sacred Work of Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. You should get a copy of it, Grandma and Grandpa, if you are raising one of your grands, and when it's just phenomenal. But Elaine, how much should we say to our grandchildren about why their mom or dad is not the one raising them?
Right. It I address this in the book, and it is has to be age appropriate. So generally speaking, this is just generally speaking, a child up to 7 years of age doesn't need a lot of information. And they also don't need a grandparent hiding the truth from them. Okay. And that's really important. So if my dad is incarcerated or my mom, um, then I may say to my child, your mom or your dad aren't here because um, they did something, they made a big mistake, and they can't be here right now. Okay. A little older, they made a big mistake and they're in jail, and that's how they're being disciplined for the mistake they made, and hopefully they can correct that. If they're in the teens, then they want to know because at the teen years, the teen is starting to look and search for their own identity of who they are.
Yeah.
And if the boundaries have been firm with the grandparents, they will figure out they're not their parent. Okay. They're not the parent, who ended up in jail or addicted or whatever. And that's the most important thing for the teen, is not to feel like there's something wrong with them because there was something wrong with their parent. So it's age appropriate.
But by having firm boundaries, that helps them.
Yes, absolutely. If I say, I don't know if you can see, but if I take my right arm and put it on my shoulder, excuse me, under my shoulder, and my left arm on my upper right arm, if I do this and I feel my boundaries, I physically feel my boundaries. I also feel like I'm giving myself a hug. I can feel the energy. And I recommend this for grandparents all the time when they are exhausted or whatever, something simple like this. You go, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing myself. And I see I have edges. I have boundaries. Okay. So that is key. That is key.
That is just terrific. So how important is building trust with the grandkids? That's probably a long-term process throughout the time that you're raising them. But is that another boundaries? I think you said were number one, but is that a key issue as well?
Oh, they go together, because if I say no when I need to say no, or yes when I need to say yes, and they realize that I'm going to do this consistently, then the honesty gets transferred over to, that's how I'm going to be. As the child grows, they've been given permission to be more honest. But if the grandparent is trying to protect them, they believe they're protecting them, and for instance, doesn't say where their parent is or what's happening to their parent, or allowing them to promise things and then not follow through and letting that continue, okay, then the child starts not to trust. I can't trust my parent who promised they would take me to so and so or buy me whatever, and I can't trust my grandparent because they're letting this happen. Now, the littler you are, you're not going to come to that conclusion, but as you get older, you feel like it's out of control.
So that consistency, doing the same thing over and over again, so they know you're going to be at the bus at 4 o'clock. You're going, you're all, yes, you're going to the PTA meeting. We always go take, they always take me to dance or to basketball. That's how it is. Either grandma does it or grandpa does it. But having those very simple, consistent behaviors can really, and also having realistic boundaries for your grandchild. And how about, Elaine, how often should we tell our grandkids that we love them?
Well, as long as it's heartfelt and not just, because you'll hear people today say, I love you, love you, love you. And that's okay. It's well intended. But these kids are going to be suspicious, okay? Because that trust needs to be built. So when I'm telling my grandchild I love them, I might get down to their level if they're small. Or I might write them, if they're a little older, I might write them a note and put it in their lunch. I will go out of my way to be creative to show them the different ways I love them, as opposed to just words. Sometimes the kids will dismiss, you can't love me. I'm a terrible kid, but that's not the grandparent. That's the child needing more reinforcement. So the grandparent shouldn't move away from that or feel hurt. This is the child in their struggle. And as long as they stay firm in everything you just said, in consistency, they're going to get it. They're going to take it away.
So it's just doing the same thing over and over again, and just being there for the grandchild, letting them know how much you love them. And I just love that. So what do you say to grandparents who've seen their goals of travel and enjoying their retirement dramatically changed by becoming parents again? How do you address that with your patients?
When we when I've done support groups, and I've done them throughout the country, and it's interesting, no matter where I go, Idaho, New Mexico, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, doesn't matter. That is a common theme. Okay. And I think that it's okay for them to grieve. It's okay for them to feel sad and disappointed. It's okay for them to get in touch with how they're really feeling. And when they move through that sadness or disappointment or grief or anger, sometimes, some of them can be angry, you know, then they're more ready to hear, yeah, I really was planning on a different kind of retirement. This wasn't what my plan was. But what I'm doing is giving meaning to my grandchild's life.
Right.
And so it's really about finding meaning in that whole journey of parenting grandparents. And when there, I don't think there's anything loftier myself. Okay. But I think that if they can go through their grief before they embrace this, belief about how they're giving their grandchild a meaningful life, then the sacrifices are, worth it.
Absolutely worth it. And folks have come up to my wife and I and said, boy, this is really a great thing you're doing. And we're like, you would do the same thing. I mean, this is your, you're just not in that position. Thank God you're not. But I mean, anybody would do this. I mean, you love your grandkids and you want to support your children where you can, but you'll do anything to give those little ones a good start. And which reminds me, do you have any, speaking of grandparents, do you have any survival skills that you recommend for grandparents when things aren't going that great and your child is asks where mom is for the 10th time this half hour and you haven't seen her in a year, let's say? How do the grandparents survive some of these things?
That is a big question. I address that a lot in the book, but I'll just give you some examples. Okay. I encourage grandparents to begin speaking as we when the child is, pushing up against something or demanding an answer or asking for the 10th time. So if my grandchild says to me, I still don't know why my mother won't take care of me, the grandparent really doesn't need an answer for that question. They need to address the feelings behind that question. Okay. And so tell me how you're feeling right now. What can we do about how those feelings? What would you like to draw? Would you like to go out and run? So you're looking for ways for them to express those emotions that just keep coming back and back to them. And it's really important in when you're in survival mode not to take whatever the children or teens say to you personally. Okay. And that's something that the grandparent generation, at least my generation, not very good at.
Oh, I'm writing these things down. I think and I hope our listeners have a pen and paper with them. This is really, really good stuff. The feelings behind the question. Boy, if we could just hit a pause button when we get one of those atom bomb questions that, and just say, wait a minute, what's really going on here behind? Why are you asking that? But not taking things personally. Oh, that's hard for us. It's just,
Yes.
we are, we still think we're grandparents when we're really parents.
Right.
And, we have candy we want to give, but no, that role's changed a little bit. So, but how can we not take things personally and just keep thinking about the child's needs above our own feelings?
Right. The thing is, the fact that parenting grandparents are raising their grandchildren or child, there's a loss for both. There's a loss for the child of the adult parent, and there's a loss for the grandparent for the life they had anticipated and is not happening. And there's a loss for the grandparenting role, which is much more fun than being a parent. Okay.
Exactly.
And so the grandparents have their own losses that they have to recognize and that they're going to grieve about. Okay. So one of the things that is really important is that the grandparent acknowledge what they're experiencing, that there are going to be these ups and downs, and they don't have to be a soldier all the time. They can be vulnerable with their children, their grandchildren. And, even if somebody were teary or crying because it just got to be too much, I wouldn't hide from my child, because what are we really teaching them? We're teaching them it's okay to cry. It's okay to have an expression of emotions. Okay. It's okay to have a vulnerable moment. If I hide and never let my grandchild see this, then we're not teaching them anything except to hide. Okay. So one of the things in my book, there's a color wheel. I don't remember which chapter, but there's a color wheel. So for kids who keep asking the same question or expressing the same emotion, like let's say anger. So I show the grandparents in my book that different colors mean different things. So if your child is not particularly verbal or is withholding, it would be hard for them to say, I'm feeling really sad right now. I miss my mom. I miss my dad. I want them back. And so the grandparent is like, I am sacrificing everything and you miss them.
Right. That
Okay.
is the real world right there. Yes. Yep.
That's right. And so if I say to them, okay, red is anger, white is calm, you make the colors anything that you want them to mean. So I'll say to the grandchild, what color are you right now? Okay. And even though they're yelling, they may not say red. They may say black. Okay.
Yeah.
They may, inside it's a call for attention. If they have a tantrum, depending on their age, but almost all the way up through 12, I'll say, sit down. If you're going to give them a timeout, do not send them to their room, because that's like abandoning them again.
That's true too. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And, but sit down on the sofa and give yourself a timeout too. Okay. So if the child can't sit still for their timeout, and every timeout is only as long as their age. So if they're 2 years old, it's 2 minutes. If they're 10 years old, it's 10 minutes. Okay.
Gotcha.
That's what they can tolerate. But for the little ones who can't sit still, you don't want to get into a battle of, I told you to sit on the sofa. This is
Right.
your timeout. You don't want to get into that. So you sit down on the sofa too, and you don't even have to communicate verbally. But the fact that you're sitting with your child, even though they're enduring this timeout, is telling them you're staying with them.
At the idea that you don't send them to their room, that's we had a situation where we were disciplining our granddaughter, and we sent her to her room, not knowing any better. And she said, I please don't do that. My mom sent me there one time and then left me alone there. I don't want to be alone. And you're thinking that in the old days with your own kids, you'd send them to their room. But that wasn't the case. And that was really light went on. I hadn't read your book at that point in time. I probably needed to read it before we had that situation. But Elaine, it's just been just such a blessing having you on. And before I let you go, before you tell us how to get a hold of your book, I want to know, what is the absolute number one thing you want all grandparents to do when raising their grands? What should we not miss? The number one.
Number one, and most grandparents don't like when I say this, is take care of yourself. Okay. It's not only about the kids. Okay.
Right.
The better I take care of myself, the better I'm going to be with my grandkids. Okay. But if I'm on fumes because I'm just in all directions, that's not helpful to the grandparent nor the grandchild. But what the response usually is I don't have time for that. Well, my philosophy is I can make time for anything I consider vitally important. So my self-care has to go to the top of the list. And I need to be aware that when I take care of myself, I'm demonstrating that for my grandchild. I expect you to take care of yourself too. Sometimes I will recommend just close the curtains, and just sit down and watch a program together, but make it, we don't have to talk. We're just going to watch and enjoy. I tell grandparents part of their self-care needs to be silly and playful, because life gets really serious really fast. So playful, we never outgrow the benefits of play. And it could be any number of things. You could be, the grandparent could be the one that creates a game with the child, or the grandparent may say, okay, let's say it's grandma is going to go to bingo tonight or wherever they go, and grandpa's going to be with you. You've got to figure that out, because if you're on fumes, think about what it's going to be like a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. So
this is absolutely terrific. The number one thing, take care of yourself, grandma and grandpa. Take care of yourself first.
Yes.
If you're out of gas, you can't raise anybody. Right?
Nope, that's right. And you are prone to becoming ill because the stress on your body is so heavy, so burdensome.
Yeah, we're not 30 anymore. We have right. We have real world stress here.
Right.
And boy, you've just given us some great insight. Don't take things personally. What's the feeling behind the question? It's okay to cry in front of your grandkids. Be human. And what color are you right now? Just so I just love those things. And they're all found in your book, The Sacred Work of Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. Where can our listeners get your book?
The easiest way and the discounted way is to go on Amazon.
Okay.
Because the book is discounted now, and you can get it within 2 days. Back in like 2012 to 2016, 17, I had a website where I was selling the book at a discount, but I think it's actually a better discount on Amazon.
Oh, okay. Well, what isn't discounted on Amazon these days, right? So,
right.
Elaine, I hope you could go ahead. I'm sorry.
Also, I have a fair amount of books available. If you have anybody, who can't even afford what Amazon charges, which is possible, let me know and we can move some books your way and you can pass them out as needed. I'm not looking for any kind of reimbursement.
Well, this is really a ministry for you, isn't it? It just
yes, it is.
That's absolutely great. I hope you'll come back on again, and maybe we'll take one subject that I know you could really dig into it and really help our grandparents with some basic practical steps on how to live this grand life. And it's just been terrific having you on today. And hopefully, and I know it's taken a while for us to get it together, but it was really, really worth it. So thank you for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life.
My pleasure. Thank you, Greg.
Remember to never waste your pain. Your story can help others. That's the whole point of It's a Grand Life. Please reach out to me. I can be a blessing to you and pray for you, or help you connect to free resources that can make your journey a little easier. God can use your situation to bless others, even halfway around the world. Together, we have hope. And as my own grandma used to say, and she was always quoting biblical promises to me, but this one from Isaiah 26:3, He will keep him or her in perfect peace, whose mind is fixed on Him, because he trusts in Him. Please make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. I look forward to talking to you again real soon, but remember, with God's help, it's a grand life.